For fiscal 19 actuals too, we'll get those from Barbara, which I think would be, I think this new
That would be
format that we
helpful.
switched to last year, I think the townspeople appreciated it. I know we did. It made it a lot easier for us to,
When do we usually get the fiscal year end numbers?
Usually like right around now.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
But Barbara's out
Yeah.
for most of January.
Right,
So
so-
we
okay.
should have them for the February meeting,
Yep.
and we can get that data
yeah,
put in here.
okay.
So Medicare 120, that didn't seem like a huge increase. Unemployment, they want to just continue to fund as is.
Okay.
Right, Council on Aging, so something that Nate and I had discussed and we were doing for this year, I have been making PDFs of all the requests, sending them to Nate, and I have them as well. We were having a little bit of difficulties getting into the email and everything, and have you been receiving them okay? Like I made scans.
When did you send them?
I sent some last week and then 3 more
Then
today.
no. I didn't check today, but I don't think I saw anything last week. Unless, so it might be my spam folder. I'll have to check.
Okay, so we'll
But you sent it to the new,
I did.
okay. All right, I'll have to check that then.
But we can do, get these up on the screen for everybody, just so you can see item by item what they're looking for. But the next one, so Council on Aging, they're looking to increase their expenses by $500 this year. And that is because they're going to have the larger van, and they're trying to take into consideration like gas prices.
We're gonna have 2 vans.
Well, no, we're
Two vans
not,
and a
we're
car.
not having Council on Aging operate
rickshaw.
2 vans. One of the town vehicles that's currently online will be traded in
Okay.
or
Right.
disposed of.
Okay.
We're gonna keep whichever one is in the best
Right.
operating condition. So we may end up getting rid of the old sedan that the animal control officer is using and have him use the
This is what we
van.
had thought before town.
Yeah,
meeting.
that's what we were told previously, I
Right.
thought, yeah.
Yeah, there are no plans to increase the Council on Aging fleet or add another driver. I know that was asked at town meeting, and I thought, you know, the question was kind of put out there and sort of redirected. But there are no plans that I'm aware of to increase any of that. So we have for Council on Aging expenses, they're accounting $2,000 for postage. They do send out their monthly newsletter and several other announcements, and that's essentially the same as last year. The transportation and the fuel, they went up by $500 to account for the larger vehicle. $700 for office supplies. Vehicle repairs, she actually decreased this by $200. Historically, they've provided $500 for oil changes and repairs. We're assuming that a brand-new van, that there shouldn't need to be any major repairs done. So she's allowing $300 for that. Dues and memberships, $850, and that's for the Mass Council on Aging conference that they attend and that we belong to. $200 on supplies for the functions that they're holding. They've been doing a lot more for the seniors in the way of different breakfasts and lunching type events. So $200 for that. And then $200 for miscellaneous expenses that might come up along the way. If the miscellaneous category is bothersome, I can help her kind of reallocate that amongst the other lines if you prefer there to be a label on it. But I thought that that seemed reasonable when it was discussed with her.
Yeah, I get to go once a month, because I'm a veteran. as well as a
And
whole
you're-
person.
And you're retired. too. You have all the time in the world, Steve. We know.
He's not missing a single breakfast.
Or lunch, whatever they do.
I know.
Toward the end of the month.
We have for Council on Aging support staff, that is the budget for the van driver. And this includes a 1.6% cost of living adjustment. Wage and personnel, we expect them to vote tonight. And I believe that the number that Social Security gave out and the number that they're going to vote for cost of living is 1.6%. And this individual is already at the top of the range, so that's why there's no mention of a merit
Okay, good,
increase.
good.
Council on Aging, the director stipend.
Yep.
She requested 10,000 this year. The number, if we do the cost of living adjustment on it, on her stipend, because it is a wage and personnel, is if you look at my column on the right, it's 7793.
Okay.
I do not believe that we have any plans to increase her hours at this time. So I would not recommend doing the $10,000 number.
Well, and we did a 50% increase last year, right?
We did an increase last year. Last year she had asked for the 10.
Yep.
And we kind of met her halfway. And in our minds, our being myself and the Board of Selectmen, I think we feel like we're providing the hours for that position that we feel is appropriate at
Okay.
this time. So we don't have any plans to increase workload or responsibilities. So I would recommend that you consider the number to the right of that, the 7793. I think that's more in line with our priorities going forward from an HR perspective.
So now, is there anything, since it seems like, if I heard you correctly, the COA is doing more events and such, that the director is handling or facilitating
Well,
over
they
and above
have
what
a
you're
very
doing?
active board.
Right. So the
Who's
board's taking that
facilitating.
responsibility.
Yes,
Yep.
yes, they have a very active board, an active chair. And some of the events are also being put on, it's not all falling on the COA director's
Yep.
shoulders. For example, and Steve is probably familiar with it, a lot of the veterans events are also being organized by Roxanne, our veterans agent. So she's putting a ton of time into facilitating some of these events. And there are staff people who work for the Council on Aging on different grants and everything, who are in the office every day, kind of facilitating the newsletters being put out, and setting up for these events and everything.
So I know the stipend is just that. It's a stipend for the whatever the amount of work is
Correct.
that she
It's
does.
just a
But in
standalone.
somebody's mind, it must be converted into a number of hours per week, right? I mean,
Yes,
so
and
I'm
that's
sure
a
somewhere along the
conversation
way,
we've been having.
somebody's converting it to an hourly rate and all of
Correct.
that. So
Correct. I can find out what that magic number is.
I mean, what's the expectation for a number of hours that she puts in? I mean, I'm sure some weeks she exceeds that and other weeks she doesn't, but.
Right, exactly. You know, it's a very flexible schedule. Some weeks she's here portions of every single day, and other times you don't see her for several days.
Okay.
I think it really varies depending on what other events are going on. And if they're on-site events versus off-site events.
Well, then I think I would personally tend to agree with the selectmen. that Absent any projected increase in the amount of work, I don't see why we would want to do more than the cost of living. You're not that hungry, are you, Steve? Okay.
He does have a fun trip.
We'll have to start bringing in potluck for the FinCom.
No, then we'd have
No,
people
Barbara will
coming.
be
No,
back
just-
with
just
her
for Steve.
cookies next time.
He'll be eating the whole time.
All right.
The moderator's salary,
Yep.
I just carried from last year. And then where are we here? Okay, so
Planning board.
Which line number is that?
140.
140.
Don't look at me, I didn't put it. Get those dagger looks across the table.
That was awesome.
This is when it would have been handy to be able to project.
Yeah.
Because we received a very well put together letter.
We can table this and
from
talk
Ann.
about it next month if you'd rather.
I think we should
Okay.
because I feel like her letter, I can also email this to everybody so that you have an opportunity to read it.
Yeah.
Sure.
It very clearly and concisely explains the reason for the request
Right.
and the increase, and I feel like you want to read that.
And close the door.
Oh. Yes.
I just didn't,
We getting close to building?
Okay.
So if you want to come back to that one.
Yeah, I mean, we're still in the early stages. I think we can come back to that.
Up top, I think I had left out conservation.
Yes.
So they're looking.
Well, no, the agent you put in.
Yeah, so the agent, that is with the cost of living and a 2% merit. That would put that individual at $31.08 per hour for 12 hours a week.
Right here, conservation
Conservation agent. So that would put him with the COLA and merit at $31.08 per hour times 12 hours a week, 52.2 weeks per year. And that's where that number is coming from there. It shows up on the spreadsheet as a little bit different in terms of the increase. It looks more like a 4% instead of a 3.6. I believe the reason for that is that by the time they hired this person, it was a little bit into the fiscal year. And so I think that they felt like they had more hours to work with. If you do all the math out and make it an even 3.6% increase, it comes out to some odd number, like having him work 11.7 hours per week. So if he's working 12, it's a difference of like $100 and something in the total budget. So I thought just for everybody's sanity going forward, he's 12 hours per week, and at that new pay rate, that's what it comes out to.
Just
No,
for
I'm sorry, I put it in the wrong.
my own edification, the merit increase, what is that based on?
So this year we started doing performance evaluations, and we just implemented that process this year. I was telling Nate earlier, the process, it's gone reasonably well. There are some instances we've run into where it's not really that applicable. Say for instance, if you have, just to use the example, a call firefighter who's completely per diem. If the person doesn't show up for any shifts because they're not required to, or they, how do you evaluate somebody if it's
Right.
like, well, they came to one car accident 6 months ago and did a good job? I mean, it's a little hard to kind of group everybody together, just where some of the jobs are very different. Even within the same classification, people are working different hours, and for different departments, say an administrative assistant, for example, those job descriptions all vary significantly depending upon which department it's for. We had somebody at the library who I think works 3 hours a week. And it was like, well, how much time are we going to have them put into doing this performance evaluation if it's like goals and objectives for somebody who works 3 hours a week on kind of an as-needed basis? It's just, so we're trying to kind of normalize the process and find that appropriate spot. But our intent was, in years past, everybody just universally got a 2% merit raise.
Right.
And we wanted to give department heads a few more tools in the toolkit, so if you have somebody who's
So that they have some discretion.
yeah, so if you have somebody who's really going above and beyond, and it's affordable and you're not gonna push them over the top of the wage and personnel range, that's the control that we have.
Yep.
You can't just give any percentage, you can't put them over the top of their range.
Right.
So assuming that that's the case, you might be able to reward a really great performer. And likewise, if you have somebody who's kind of just inching along and doing the bare minimum, well, you know, maybe it's only a cost of living adjustment.
Right.
And
Right.
you hope that you hire department heads who are able to kind of use that discretion and make recommendations accordingly.
Got it.
And they dig out the old bell curve.
So for the conservation expense, oh, I'm sorry.
No, just the other question, I mean, I know when we approved the agent last year, the assumption was that the majority of their salary was going to be recouped through fees and such.
Right.
Do we know if that's happening, and do we have any sort of data that tracks that? Is there any way of proving or disproving that?
I can see about getting some data as far as what that department is taking in the way of fees. I believe the last I had known, they were in the process of increasing the fees to be more in line with other towns around here. I can certainly get a follow-up on that.
Well, because the sales pitch last year to us was that any money that we invested in a conservation agent would come back to us.
Right.
Maybe not dollar for dollar, but certainly pretty close. I don't remember. I want to say 2/3 somehow sticks in my head, but.
He's doing really well. I know he's been of great assistance to them. He's working more than the 12 hours per week, but they're able to offset the additional hours. He'll bill as a consultant
Right.
via the 53G fund, so applicants pay for that. We're not
Right.
paying for that.
Right.
But the stuff he's doing with the 12 hours is really like kind of, he's basically running that commission and office day to day. He's spending office time here, which is something that we never had before.
Right.
So that's nice. And he's really kind of getting a handle on some of these different projects and also assisting them with looking at different opportunities that might be available in the way of grants and everything. But he is working more than 12 hours, but we're not paying him for more than 12.
Right.
Good enough.
Okay.
Sorry, so their expenses?
So the expenses, they want to be whole again in the way of the $3,000 that was cut from them a while back to allow clerical hours from the building department. They're looking to recoup some of that into their expense budget, but not for clerical hours. The town, we had received a vulnerability preparedness grant through the state. And part of that, we had a large workshop session that we did, and we're still in process with that grant. But part of it was the town identifying different priorities for the future and the direction that we want to see things trending in overall, and where do we want to expend our resources. And the results of that were primarily people are interested in preserving some open space, and likewise making sure that things don't get too built up so that we alleviate some flooding concerns and issues like that. They're also interested in protecting the quality of our water. We don't want anybody encountering issues with their wells that could impact home values. So those seem to be a lot of the priorities, if you will, of the town. And one of the nice things about the MVP program is when we wrap up our grant for this cycle, so we're going to be doing that in early February, then we can apply for action grants through the state to actually implement some of these priorities that we've identified. So it could be getting funds from the state to protect certain areas or certain wellheads, different things like that. But part of applying for those grants is that you need technical data to include with your applications. So they're looking for, as part of their expense budget request, $2,450 to have available to them should they need to contract with a hydrogeologist or an ecologist or somebody with technical expertise to help them say, why do we need to protect these 3 wellhead locations? Or somebody who can help out with mapping services, kind of above and beyond what our regional planning agency could do for us. So in this way, I support this request because I feel like it aligns with the priorities of the town, not just of, the selectmen or myself. I feel like that's the direction, that's the feedback we're getting. And it's also, it's short money for big results. If we're able to secure some of these action grants, then you produce tangible results that people can see. And it's like, in the grand scheme of an overall town budget, I think it's a reasonable expense to have that kind of expertise available. There is always the option of having them come for a transfer request, but I feel like if these applications, the applications for the action grants come out in mid-April, so ideally if we could get this funded in the budget, then the funds would be ready by July 1st, and we could hopefully get our application put together and get moving so we don't miss a whole year of potential grants. And I think to put them through the transfer request process, I mean, normally I'm all for not earmarking funds if we don't need to. We had talked about this before, even with the legal budget. Like, you don't want to budget so much and then have those funds not available for other purposes.
Right.
But I feel like this isn't that much money, and I know that they want to be able to hit the ground running anytime there's an opportunity. And we could even do it with the caveat that we'll revisit the 2450 every year and say, like, well, what did you use it for? So that it doesn't just get all rolled in with the expenses and you kind of lose track of it.
I would
after
agree
a
with that,
while.
because if it's handled that way, then it's really, even though it's an expense, it's an investment in potential grant opportunities that would benefit the town.
Right, and we could also put the caveat too, if we don't want to almost like be paying twice, we could say, if you're utilizing these funds for technical expertise, we would hope that your commission could largely put together the grant application itself, so that we're not paying a grant writer per hour to then assemble these charts and information done by the professional, because that becomes a very expensive grant application if you're paying by the hour plus having a consultant come in. So I think with those caveats, that's reasonable. And the other amounts really didn't change from last year. It's their membership fees for MACC, which is required, Cape Cod Compact, meetings and mileage, office supplies, and their advertising and postage. That's one where they seem to go over sometimes. So that part's not changing. The difference really is adding in these funds so that they can have some technical assistance ready and at their disposal. So that's where the 6150 comes in.
Okay. Accountants, 200?
Yes. So the first one is for.
Oops, sorry.
That's okay. Line 200, that is Barbara's salary. And she works the 960 hours annually. Accountant support staff, this has a 1.6% COLA and a 2% merit. This is for 3 hours per week. And the reason why the increase looks like more is because our assistant treasurer collector, who also fills this role, it was required by our auditors quite some time ago that we allocate specific hours in a separate position for an assistant town accountant. So somebody who could act in Barbara's absence. And our assistant treasurer collector has been filling that role as well. She actually left us for a time. She had obtained a job in another community where the benefits and the compensation were greater than what we were able to provide. She left us for quite some time and then missed us so much that she applied for her job again when it came available. And because of the cost savings from her being gone for a while, we were able to bring her in at a higher step than what she left at. And also when she left us, she did her certification with the other town that she was with. So she did the schooling and everything for that while she was not here. So we did not pay for that schooling or anything. So that's what that is for. So we brought her in at the higher step than what she left at to get her back here. But there were enough funds appropriated from the last town meeting. So that's how we were able to do that, because of her absence. We had brought in a temporary person at that time who was not making the same dollar amount and everything. So we should be fine budget-wise for this year. So that's where we're at with that. Before too, she was making less money per hour. It was kind of strange. For the assistant town accountant role, those 3 hours, even though she was in the same office, sitting at the same desk, she was getting paid less per hour for that role than her primary role. So that was why it looks like a larger increase there, because it is different than like at last town meeting. The hourly rate went up.
I gotta try that. I gotta quit my job and then have them hire me back at a higher rate.
That almost never happens, but sometimes.
You know?
If they really like you.
It worked out really well. It really
She
did.
must bring snacks.
True. Cookies. You just go loan out
jump right
Tupperware.
on that one, Nate.
I'm gonna
We get a
try
lot of
it. You
mileage
wait.
on this one.
See if I can get away with that one.
Accountant expenses, it's $100 more than last year. She's allowing the extra $100 for our computer system. The rates are going up a tiny bit with customized data solutions that we use for the budgeting software. Treasurer collector salary, that is with a 1.6 COLA and a 2% merit. That number there.
Does the merit run indefinitely? I thought it was, isn't it, it's not capped at all? It's,
Well, she's contract,
right.
so hers is subject to negotiation with the Board of Selectmen. I guess when that position was changed from elected to appointed years ago, they opted to make it a contract position. Because that's not one of the positions customarily under the state guidelines that has a contract associated with it. But when the town did the special legislation to change it from elected to appointed, they did stipulate in that article that it would be a contract position.
So theoretically, there's nothing that says that it could be limited, or it should be limited to the 2% merit.
Correct,
They
but
could
the
do whatever they
selectmen
wanted to.
typically don't like to deviate that much and give people increases that aren't at least somewhat in line with what everybody else is getting. They've typically tried to keep it somewhat
So to answer my question, merit for this position is indefinite.
correct.
This is, sorry, was this the treasurer or the support staff?
The treasurer.
Treasurer,
Okay.
sorry. This one.
Okay.
How's the merit defined on this one?
It would be it's by contract, like is she fulfilling the obligations of her
Right.
contract?
Right.
So she would negotiate that with the selectmen.
Yep.
The certification compensation is in there. That's actually for our assistant treasurer collector, whom we were speaking about just a few minutes ago. And that amount is generated by the state. There's a statute that pertains to that. Treasurer supports.
So the assistant has a certification, but the treasurer does not?
Correct.
That's interesting.
So then the next line, treasurer support staff, that is our assistant treasurer collector. That is with the COLA and the merit, and she works 28 hours per week. And the reason why that looks like a larger increase is again because after the FY20 budget was done, she left and then came back at a higher hourly rate.
We're seeing a theme here.
How does that work?
It's the same person.
It's the same person.
I know.
So she works 3 hours as the
Assistant town accountant,
accountant, and how many hours as the treasurer?
28,
So she works 31 hours total
correct.
for an office that's open 22 hours.
She's here at 7 a.m. every day, and she's here after 2 every day.
I'm okay.
Yeah, so she does, she's doing kind of all of those things. She also she has different roles and responsibilities as far as the assistant town accountant is concerned. That has more to do with like approving warrants and things like that.
So if she left and came back, did that reset the clock on her merit also?
What do you mean?
She's subject to merit increases, correct?
Yeah.
So is it like she is a brand new hire and she can
We
get,
did treat her like that because we also we had to pay out her vacation time that she had on the books, and we didn't want a situation where if you treated it like she never left, then she would be entitled. We weren't gonna pay somebody out their vacation time and then be like, oh, and here's another 2 weeks vacation the second they come back. So she had to wait.
so she has to work a year before she accrues vacation time again?
That would be, yes, under the wage and personnel.
Do you have a certain period of time you have to work before you're qualified for merit, too?
No,
Or
I
is
don't
it
believe
just-
that the bylaws states that,
Didn't
no.
we talk about that? Didn't
And we
say
changed,
we did.
we
the first year? or
changed the
something? You had
merit,
to work at least a year or 6 months?
we changed the merit section 2 of the wage and personnel bylaw at town meeting to give the discretion to department heads.
But I thought we talked about you had to work at least 6 months before you'd be able, because it came up last year or the year
Right.
before.
That seems
Yeah.
smart.
She will have been here 6 months, though, by that point. I could go back and look at her hire
Yeah,
date.
but
She was only gone, like, it was a very short time.
right, and she got a pretty nice raise to come back. So she
did.
shouldn't get another raise as merit, is my point. That's
She
the
is
way the
one of
real
our-
world works.
I know. She is one of our top performers, though. I don't think that we would have been as well positioned as we are now had she not reapplied for the job. We're also looking at this too from a succession planning standpoint. When the current treasurer collector retires, you have this individual who is furthering their education, looking to obtain both certifications, and not just the treasurer's side, but the collector's side as well. She knows the operations of the office. She's a natural fit to just step right into that position. And that's, for myself and the selectmen, and even the current treasurer collector who's there now, that's worth something to us, to have somebody in that office who can step in at a moment's notice and just take over and basically be on autopilot.
I understand that, and I don't dispute any of that. I guess this committee has had issues with merit increases in general over the last 3 or 4 years, and we thought we had agreed to some guidelines.
Right.
Okay. We can discuss that later.
Well, just even from a financial standpoint, though, I mean, so this person left before, so, and what you would allude to, Liz, was that we couldn't, as a town, provide the salary that she was looking for.
Correct. Even with what we're providing now, giving her that boost,
Yeah.
it's still less than
Still
the
less.
other town.
That was my question.
And the insurance percentage that we pay is less.
Right.
But it was worth something to her to come back to a nice working environment. And I
Right.
think it was, you know, one of those grass is greener type things, and going somewhere else and being like, oh, you know, things were pretty good in Plympton, and I had a nice office to work in with good people who knew what they were doing. And so that was a decision that she made. We could not match what she was getting in that other town.
Right.
And they even had made certain promises to her for even like the next fiscal year and everything. But us just showing kind of that good faith effort and saying, no, like, we want you back. You know, it's there now in the budget because you left. That was enough to get her to come back. But we are really happy with her decision. And that is, she is part of our succession plan for
Right.
that office. I mean, at some point, the existing treasurer collector, our town accountant, at some point, they are going to fully retire. And we do need somebody who's capable and knows the town and qualified to step into that role.
Right.
I'm not saying, I mean, I realize nobody's irreplaceable, but that caused a fair amount of stress for a while in that office, trying to get things done and make do. We had brought in a temporary person who used to work here a long time ago. She did a great job, but she was a retiree, limited to the,
Right.
you know, the number of hours she was able to work, and wasn't quite as familiar with the way that things have been being done over the last few years. So it was worth it to us, and that was why the decision was made.
Okay.
Treasurer collector expenses, there is a $720 increase requested, and that has to do with the charge that we are being handed as a result of school department direct deposit costs. I guess it's something that in the past we were not being charged for, and that was an oversight on the part of the people that manage our payroll system, CDS, and they're charging us now. I guess it's because some people opt in or opt out of direct deposit, and giving them that choice, which we've done for years, has a cost associated with it.
Are you going to continue to give them the choice?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I would have to look into if that's something that gets negotiated in their contract.
Right.
So it's something that I can certainly look into with our school committee and find out if that's something that's part of collective bargaining.
Right.
Some people really have a strong preference when it comes to that and having that choice. Personally, I don't really understand it, but I know some people feel very strongly about wanting to have a live check in hand. So I would have to see if we wanted to look to eliminate that cost. I would have to find out what we're being charged for, like contractually, with the payroll company that processes that, and also if it's part of collective bargaining. So to be continued, I guess, on the 720. The rest of the expenses are the same, dues and membership, postage, meetings, and their computer costs, advertising for like tax title and all of that. So nothing's changing except for the 720, so I can get more clarification on that.
Okay.
I want to come back to some of those I need to itemize, but also I want to come back to town council. I want a chance to just pull what we've spent to date and all that. So I think we should come back to that one.
Okay.
Do you want to do highway?
Sure.
So highway superintendent, this is less, we have a new person. So that's why there's the decrease.
In labor is basically the COLA plus 2%.
Yes. One person is not eligible for the 2%. They were at the top, so they have not been put in for it. There is also a fair amount of overtime money in this budget. So there's, let me see, what did we do here?
For
178.5.
inclement winter weather.
There is, but some of that money could be absorbed in the snow and ice budget as well. So if you want to, I would say, I mean, that one, it is what it is for now, but knowing that we could come back to it if we needed to refine the overtime number, if we need a spot where we have to reduce later. I think we did the same thing last year. We kind of came back to it and said, well, wait a minute, do you need all of that for overtime?
Right.
I had reduced the request a little bit when I had to go back through and reduce the COLA percentage. Let me just see what we're talking here, just to break that.
Because if one of the
up.
people's not eligible for the maximum 2%, then that should be
So
below
the
3.6
total-
instead of above 3.6.
Right, it's the overtime that's
Okay.
making it more. So just straight salaries, that would put us at 166,690. And then the rest is, they are having 11,810 available for overtime. So that 11,810 number, I think we might want to revisit, but you probably want to wait until you're further along in the process.
Okay.
Is overtime worth breaking out on its own line? I just know at our company, overtime's a separate line in the budget. So you can see how much they're working. I know we have a lot of lines.
No. I have no problem adding lines.
I don't know, it's just an idea.
What happens if that overtime doesn't get used?
Just
It gets
goes
used
back.
somewhere.
Just, yeah.
I don't know. That's something to think about. I mean, well, we would have to do it here. I mean, this would pretty much be the only department we would do it, would be
Right.
Public Works.
Right.
Because everything else is contractual. Or collective bargaining.
I always prefer seeing line items if they're,
Fire department's not collecting.
No,
bargaining.
fire isn't. Fire, you could do it too.
That one might be interesting. Okay, that's a good thought. We'll come back to that.
General highway, that's staying the same. That's utilities, meetings and mileage, vehicle repairs, office supplies, dues and memberships, street sweeping. So nothing has changed with that, and they did itemize all of it. And I can send these to you so that you can see them. And next meeting, we can coordinate and make sure that we can get onto the Wi-Fi and
Yeah.
project.
Okay, good, thank you.
Equipment and maintenance, they're not proposing a change there either.
Okay.
You can
looks
get on
like-
the Wi-Fi, it's just not going anywhere.
Right.
It's in it.
Do you want to talk about 325 or?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
So 325 Park Department, it was explained to me that this is for part-time people to provide additional mowing services, to basically clear around stones and monuments and that kind of thing. And an idea that I had after meeting with Concom and going over the budgets and everything. So right now we have the land that the town acquired off of Prospect Road. There's a piece of land that abuts that's owned by the town of Middleborough, but it's here in Plympton. And Soul Homestead actually, it's part of the area that they lease from the town of Middleborough for their operations.
Right.
And right now we have a situation, the way that they were being assessed changed for a few different reasons. And in the lease between Middleborough and Soul Homestead, it stipulates that Soul has to pay the taxes to Plympton. And it's becoming unaffordable for them. We've worked out a creative solution because we have a need for a place for people to park off of Prospect Road so that they can access all of the open space that we purchased. And also to access the trail system in there, and really just all of that land. So we're looking to enter into a lease with Middleborough that basically we lease a portion of that land back so that we can have joint parking with Soul Homestead, enough room for like horse trailers or maybe a school bus. And we want access to the beginning part of that trail system so that we can construct a trailhead and pursue some grant opportunities available through DCR and some other agencies. So it's part of a bigger plan to really give people access to the land that we purchased. And as part of that, we would have the amount of the lease be equal to the payment in lieu of taxes that they're obligated to pay us. So as part of that, we're going to need funds to get said parking area established. It'll be an unimproved parking area, like gravel. But to get that established, there are boardwalks in need of maintenance at a couple of our park areas. There is some mowing to take place, some trail maintenance, things like that. So I was talking to Nate earlier, and I was saying, like, what if we had our highway department and the full-time people that work there assume full responsibility for all the mowing and everything, and utilize this $7,000 or so to actually maintain our town-owned land and parks, and use those funds, kind of repurpose them, or I would argue use them for the intended purpose, rather than paying extra part-time people to be doing, I mean, how many people do we need mowing?
Right.
I don't know. I think that it's reasonable to say that including the highway superintendent, we have 4 full-time people working for the highway department to operate that equipment. Why do we need $7,000 more for additional mowing and weed whacking and stuff. But I do think that we have a real need to maintain some of this land, especially if we want to acquire more.
Right.
I mean, it's not serving anybody if you can't get access to it, or if the boardwalk system is failing, or if there's not any signage and people don't know it's there. And maybe there is some additional mowing and clearing that kind of needs to take place to make it more visible and for people to feel safer using it.
I don't believe that in the summertime they use their full-time people to like mow the cemeteries and the.
They
and the
hire
part-time
part-timers.
people, yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah, all the
maybe
retired people.
reallocate,
necessarily.
reallocate some of the duties and have them,
Yeah.
you know, take that on, and then maybe repurpose those funds. If we did that, I'm wondering, I think we should change the name of the line.
Yeah.
So that we don't run into a situation where it's like, well, was that supposed to be a salary line? And we're really turning it into more of an expenses line. And we could still utilize some of those part-time people, if need be, to maybe mow and clear some of these areas. I'm not saying that our highway department has to do it all and maintain those, but I think repurposing those funds a little bit, rather than just having it be a given that every summer we're gonna bring these extra people on board
Right.
when we have 4 full-timers already.
And my only comment to that, which I was, generally in favor of the whole concept, my only comment was in a specific case that Liz described about getting access to the Twin Brooks, Two Brooks, whatever it is, was that perhaps we, rather than allocating money in the town budget, maybe we could push back on them a little bit to say, you've got this money that you've raised, you are saying you have plenty of money available, why don't you take some of that money and create the initial parking area, and then we could commit to maintaining it using these funds. So, that was my only thought.
That's a valid point. I mean, that was part of the original
That's what I thought, yeah. Yeah.
raise.
Yeah. I mean, they said when they were here a couple months ago that they had plenty of money to cover the bank fees and the whatever, the refinancing fees, so they should have enough to put a parking lot in. Okay.
Snow and ice was staying the same.
At this rate, it should be even lower.
Knock on wood, big time.
They're saying Saturday.
I was gonna say a particle board.
We had a lead up like this to the blizzard of '78, so don't speak too loud.
I know.
I remember-
No, it'll only fall on me. Oh, God.
It's all gonna dump on Mayflower Road.
You son of a...
Transfer station, so the increase that's shown there, our contract with Waste Management expires in August. And there's talk about disposal fees increasing by approximately 25%. And prevailing wages will apply at that time. We should know more mid-February as to what the increase will look like. I'm assuming that they'll send us a new contract. So we can come back to that one, but I just wanted to put it out there now.
Right.
And that's the reason for the increase. Everything else is basically budgeted as it has been. We have disposal costs, electric up there, the phones up there, some miscellaneous repair, and hazardous waste day. That costs us on average about $5,000. The waste management contract, disposal fees are going up everywhere
Right.
in general.
Right.
It just costs more to get rid of things, so
Right.
I don't know that there's much negotiating or a real way around it, but
Yep.
that's the reason for it.
Staff?
Transfer station staff, This is with a 1.6% COLA and a merit increase of 2%. The reason why it's more, and I need to circle back with them on this budget, is last year we ran into this too. So last year, they had put their overtime like separately on this expense sheet, and you had opted to cut that amount by some figure.
All of it.
And so it looks like this year, my assumption is that they are building it into the hours.
What is their overtime?
To cover when people are on vacation.
To cover when like somebody's on vacation
If they
or
call in
whatever. If they're on vacation on a Saturday, on a busy day, they call people in for backup and everything. And this committee had cut that last year. And this year, the budget that I was given, it was very just kind of straight out hourly rate times however many hours, times however many weeks they're working. And so my only thought on why the increase, why the math isn't adding up, is because they must have factored in overtime into the hours that they're showing on here. So I need to have them back those numbers out so that we can see it.
Maybe I'm thinking about this too simplistically, but we know how many hours the transfer station is open.
Hence my
Correct.
And
questions.
we know how many people it takes to man it on each of the different days.
Correct.
So shouldn't it be like a really flat number?
Yes,
And
it
last
should.
Sunday, it wasn't open.
It should.
Yep. And you can't
this
be in there a
And I
minute
can send
past.
this to you
Yeah.
guys, but it's, the red pen is just changing the
Like, I mean,
1.6
I
don't have this
some
COLA.
problem
people have
on
more tenure or
Thursdays.
something, have slightly higher rates
Sure.
or whatever.
Well,
Correct, but it's,
But it shouldn't be that complicated.
right, it's not rocket science. I think that they built the overtime into the number of hours
That'd be
worked, so
nice
I'm
to
gonna
have
have them
broken
take
out.
it out,
Yeah.
so that you can see.
And everybody is at top merit.
The 2% merit is what the department head had put them in for. The animal inspection lines, those aren't proposed to change at all. We have kind of a good system going with our current person. He serves in both roles. So, building department, building inspector, so a lot is taken in, obviously, like the inspection fees. And we also have our assistant building inspector who does come in periodically to kind of check in and whatever. And that was, part of this was to go along with the fees and kind of projecting out that amount. So that was why that one increased by $2,000.
Did you say an assistant building inspector?
We have like an alternate, I shouldn't say assistant,
We do?
alternate building inspector. Yeah, if our building inspector was away,
Oh, okay.
there is somebody who's authorized to
I've
work
never
in
met
his
that person.
absence.
Tom's always been
His
around.
name is Bill Kelly.
Oh, okay.
Building department administrative assistant, this is with a 1.6% COLA and a 2% merit. And this individual works 30 hours per week. And so that's where that figure came from. And we are working on putting together a more concrete job description for that position. It's always been kind of loose in the past with what assistance they're providing to other boards and committees. So I think we need to kind of nail that down a little bit, just so that it's defensible for the 30 hours.
Yeah, over the last 3 or 4 years, as you guys will remember, we pulled money out of different departments and put it here with the understanding that she was providing assistance to other departments, which may or may not be happening going forward.
Right, and our planning board, which we can come back to next time, so that you can read the letter and everything, but looking for more. They want a clerical person to attend their meetings and help them with like official
That would make sense.
communications and
Yeah.
everything. And I think it makes sense, especially where they're an elected board. And it's not like they're looking, I mean, they could be coming to us asking for a full, like a town planner or something, and they're not doing that. They're able to kind of work around that with 53G funds and everything. So I think it's a reasonable request, and we can get more into that one next time. But I think all the more reason to kind of figure out how many hours the building department admin is working, and kind of just nail down which boards and committees and how many hours, so that if they come to us in the future looking for clerical help, we need to know what hours are being spent where. Plumbing and gas inspector, this is another one that's like done with the fees per inspection. Wiring staying the same, zoning staying the same, and department expenses are staying the same. So the only real increases are just building inspector and plumbing and gas, and a lot of that is just done on a per inspection basis with the fees. Emergency dispatch, we're seeing
yeah.
if they can come in on February 10th, which would be your next meeting date. We're looking at, what I was hoping to do is see if the police chief is prepared to present his budget to you that night at 5:30. And then we could just go down to the big meeting room at 6:30 and have them give us their presentation. And they could do it for you and the selectmen at the same time.
Okay.
So that they don't have to come in twice, and we can kind of get all of our questions answered and put everything out there. So
This has to do with that report that we saw that had the call
Correct.
volume that seemed like it
Yeah,
was.
Right.
that was kind of a
Right.
skew,
Okay.
yeah.
that's exactly what it is.
So this is their original projection, and would be that we would be somewhere in the 200K range.
Right.
So that's why we put it in here just as kind of a placeholder.
Right.
But if you notice, we also pulled it out of what it had been in the police services.
Yes, thank you for
grouping.
pointing that out.
So I did pull it out of there, and because they didn't want anybody at town to say, well, wait a minute, why is this police budget going up by $150,000 through no fault of their own,
Right.
potentially.
Right.
So
Right.
we did make it a separate line item, and it is shared
It's
between police and fire and
Right.
and whatever else. So that seemed to make sense.
Right, so we pulled that out. I didn't know if you wanted to, I think further up under police or fire, we're still carrying the civil defense line, and you had made a decision to eliminate that. So it probably,
Any of these lines that are crossed out like this, when it comes time to print, we do.
you'll get rid of those.
We hide them.
Okay,
And this is where I always go wrong every year, because I forget to unhide them when it comes time to print the budget sheets, and it
Okay.
messes me up every
I
year.
put a strike through, just so you're aware, under Parks Department
Yes.
Labor,
Yes, I
just
saw
so we
that.
would know to
Yep.
change the title.
Yep, I saw that. So yeah, fire department clerical has been it's still Captain Schusted,
Right,
but it's
But
now
he just
obviously,
does it as
it's now
part of his
obviously part of his
full-time
salary.
job.
And the civil defense director is now part of Chief Silva's description, so.
right.
Always was, wasn't it?
They always got a separate
yeah.
$2,000 stipend in the
Oh.
past. So we would use it as an
The
opportunity.
job was there.
With the changeover in personnel, it seemed like a good time to just,
Roll it up.
yeah. And then further down, veterans agent, that has the COLA, that's a stipend position
Yep.
under wage and personnel, and no changes proposed for the expenses.
And that's it for, no, yeah,
I have a
reserve thing.
few down at the bottom. The interest and loan, that account, no change. No change to principal and interest. Debt exclusion, that one's gone down a little bit. I had the police station debt numbers too, but the
Yeah, it was lower,
decrease
right?
looked really significant, so I just wanted to verify the accuracy
It
of
didn't
that.
seem to make sense.
I didn't want to get your hopes up and put it, I had it in the spreadsheet.
Wasn't it under
and then
200,000?
Yeah, it came out, I think, to like 169.
I'm on to you, though, I noticed it.
I know, I had it in there and then I was like, oh no, let me delete it. So some of the others we're expecting in by the end of the month. So I don't know if you want to have your next meeting on the 10th of February, if we aim to do police, hear the dispatch proposal, and then I don't know if you want to try to do another meeting also in February, or when.
Well, typically, that's when we get into sort of our rhythm of at least 2 meetings a month. I know in the past, we've actually gone to every week, once in a while, but.
Right, I think
But
last
that's when
year
we
we
were
didn't
meeting
have
with-
to do it because
No.
you don't have to meet with all
And you were
the
running
smaller
interference for us
ones.
on a lot of the committees, so that was good. But I think we probably should entertain maybe a second meeting in February.
Yeah, maybe towards the end of the month.
So if we
just to
meet on the
wrap up.
10th with the 24th,
24th.
well, that's not the holiday week, right?
No,
So
no, the
that worked out.
holiday, that
So-
would work.
So maybe we
Wanna
can
do the
tentatively,
10th and the 24th?
tentatively pencil that in for the 24th.
All right. Excellent.
So we should have the others in by then. Board of Assessors, they were going to vote on theirs last week and would have had it in on time.
Excuse me.
But I think that theirs had to be rescheduled due to illness, so I think they may be voting on theirs tonight. So then we'll get that budget in.
Okay.
Library, very similar, they're waiting for the trustees to take their vote. I met with the police chief to go through some of his numbers and everything. So he's putting his together now and could have it ready for your next meeting on the
Okay.
10th. And we'll get that one to you ahead of time, just because it's bigger. And fire, same thing, he's just refining some of the numbers, so maybe we could get fire out of the way.
On the
And see
24th.
what else is remaining on the 24th. And then it'll really be
Schools.
really just the schools, and they're kind of on their own
Well, and the
pace
clerk
for
too,
that.
right? The clerk
The
has
town clerk will have to come to you too.
make a presentation, so maybe we can pencil her for the 24th.
Maybe you could pencil her in for the 24th as well. And yeah, we can, go from there.
Okay.
I can send out to everybody all of the backup data from tonight. And then for the next meeting, I'll send that to everybody too, that way you have it. And then we'll be prepared between both of us. We'll try to figure out what happened with the, I don't know if it was a Wi-Fi issue or an email.
I'm trying to think of the last time I actually logged into I probably haven't logged in since I actually sent out the board notice.
Okay.
So that's been 3 or 4 days
Our
now.
IT person is here tomorrow, so I'll bring my laptop up here tomorrow and show him that it did not work.
Okay.
And we can try to figure that out. But I want to at least send you the stuff so that you have it. If we think something won't work, I'll even print it out for you guys, just so that, I think it's helpful, just instead of me talking the whole time, like line by line,
Well, and it's nice-
actually see what they requested.
It's nice for us to have it too, to refer back to, because I know in the past, we've actually pulled out previous budget
Right.
Right.
sheets to see what the thinking was, 2 years ago, because I sure as heck can't remember.
Right. We can do that, and that way you just have that backup data.
And we'll need to get a revenue projection from Barbara when she's
Barbara.
back too.
Yes.
So, okay. Anything else about the stuff so far, budget so far?
No, I mean, everything seems like it's on track, at least schedule-wise. We have a town center campus committee.
What's that doing?
So they basically took the old public safety building committee and repurposed it. And they're looking at all of our town-owned buildings and not just the center campus area, but this area in particular, but also all of our town-owned buildings, and trying to help kind of prioritize some things that need to happen. They're gonna help us put together sort of like maintenance plans or where we need to be focusing our efforts. So they're looking at all of that.
And I'm sorry, it's not just for the center, right? It's for any town-owned building?
Correct,
Yeah, okay.
correct. So we're putting together right now, like we established an inventory for each town-owned building of kind of, not to be negative, but all the issues. So that we can start factoring in like, well, what would this cost and where would it fit into a capital plan? What's high priority, medium priority, low priority? So they're in process with that. I think that they meet again this week. So we'll probably get a good sense from them in terms of any capital items that we need to be looking for. And I can send something out to the big departments and just kind of say, are there any capital items that you're aware of that we need to be looking at? And I was gonna ask you, I tried to update the capital form, like electronically, and it won't let me.
Yes, I gotta.
You don't have read-write access to that?
I don't.
Read only.
Yeah. I think it was Monica was her name.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I said I was gonna get that for you and I didn't yet.
No, that's okay. I just didn't know if it was
There's a set
easier
of
if I sent them something.
There's a set of instructions, yeah, there's a secret.
I couldn't manipulate the
secret
form
code
to
word
make
you
it
put
look
in there
like
and
it was
it unlocks it
issues.
for you and you can do whatever you want. So I'll have to dig that out and get it for you.
Okay. But otherwise, I think things are on track. I think we should aim for that April 13th date
Yep,
to have you vote your finals recommendations.
yep. Yeah,
And
'cause if-
then come see the selectmen, they can vote theirs after hearing.
So if we get into an every other week rhythm, say, starting in February, so that'll give us 2 in February, 2 in March, and then probably that
one in
April
April.
13th might be the next one.
Right.
We would do our final vote,
Right.
so, okay.
And we can handle it if anything comes up in between. I met with the new school superintendent last week.
And we met her.
Jill,
Yeah, no, when she was still understudying with,
right,
up in Halifax.
Yeah, we went to the Halifax
right, the tri-town.
Tri-Town meeting. Right. Okay. So the only other thing that was on the agenda was, I had a meeting with John Trainer last week, or 2 weeks ago now, I guess. He is the selectman that is the liaison to the FinCom. I guess they each have different committees that they update. So he and I had a meeting for, I don't know, 45 minutes or so. And Liz has pretty much covered most everything that we talked about. So he said he would like to meet every other month or so with me, just to kind of bring us up to speed as a committee. So I suggested that perhaps he come and speak to the whole committee. And it's just, a lot of the things that he was talking about are things that, again, Liz has already spoken about, like the parking lot, land trade-off that's being proposed and that sort of thing, and the town center campus committee.
The trailer's going.
is.
Trailer is going to Rehoboth, was it?
We hope so. I have to put it out for bid and follow the disposition
Right,
guidelines,
right.
but they are
But they're
interested,
interested,
so
right.
I'm hoping that they put it in a bid.
Right. You may have, I don't know, those of you that get the local paper, you may have seen something about the regional transit. So there's being work done to pursue that. There is a grant
Catra?
that was, yes, that was
Yes.
received through the work of Representative Lenatra for $95,000 to be used towards accessibility of a town building. The thought was to use it at the old townhouse, but the new approach or the new thought is to perhaps make it for this building, so that, and specifically this part of the building, so that folks could get into, so they could come join us in the 1707 room. So that's,
Is there a handicap ramp in the back?
There's a ramp, but this would be a lift. This would be one of those, you know, you wheel the thing in, the door closes behind you, and it actually, it's an open elevator, basically.
We need to figure out the ramp in the back too. It looks like the footings were disturbed when they regraded and did the parking lot for the new police station. Steve was checking it out and he was like bouncing up and down on it. It's not good, so we need to get that.
They're not supposed to bounce.
No, they're not. And I think
The assistant building inspector knew that.
I think at the end of that
why he and
one
I gotta
too,
talk.
there are a couple steps, so it kind
Together.
of defeats the purpose of the ramp.
Right.
If you have to go up 2 steps to get onto it. Yeah.
I recall going in that way with the ambulance. Makes it easier to take the stretcher up.
There is also some technology work being done around a technology infrastructure that the town is looking to solicit the help of the school district IT director to act as sort of a consultant, to kind of come in and do a survey of the buildings.
Yes, he's been helpful.
Make them all interconnected and functional and all of that good stuff that, you know, a real town should be.
Right, and we're trying to do the fiber install.
Right.
We're in process
So
on
it's
that,
part of,
waiting
yeah,
for some.
it's part of all of that.
It is.
Or the next step, I guess, the next logical
It
step.
is. And the school department's been great about letting us kind of borrow him and his expertise.
Right. And John mentioned that, you know, perhaps once we have a master plan, we can then go after some grants to get some more funding to,
If they ever get
Implement some of it.
5G down here, you won't need the fiber.
yeah, but we'll all melt, apparently.
Right?
I know.
Yeah, the wheel melt. 5G will stay.
You won't need a microwave either.
And then he actually provided some of the legal expense. I know you mentioned it, but this is only through October, so I'm sure you have more updated information, so that will be
Yes.
helpful when it comes time to address that line. So that was it. I just kind of wanted to give you folks a 50-cent recap on what we had discussed. And again, I suggested with him that you know, it would be nice if he came in to speak to the full group. So.
So I have fiber.
How'd you get it?
Because he's retired and he's got nothing else to do.
No,
He buys it at the store.
They came in, Verizon came
type of
in, they
fiber.
wired Brook Street, probably about down as far as Upland Road, then they all ran off to Duxbury. And they never come back.
That's typical.
So they called me up one day and said, do you want to go to over to Files? Well, what will it cost me? I said, nothing. I said, okay.
Always say yes.
When I say nothing, I say yes.
Okay, if there are no other items to discuss this evening,
I make a motion.
Mike makes a motion.
I'll second it.
Catherine seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
6:57, we're done, thank you.